Yeah, it's so true. And you can, when people say, I don't have time, it's such a lie because they do. You and I get the same amount of time. We get 1,440 minutes in a day. Time's going to happen whether we like it or not. Time is the great equalizer. Time is not prejudice. We can't manage time, but we can manage our attention. And you're 100% right. It's interesting to me too, Jürgen, when people say, oh, I'm just too busy. Well, what they're really saying is, I'm too busy for you. And so we have these crazy words we use in our language. I don't have time, I'm too busy, or I need to kill time. Well, time never really did anything to you. So it's kind of crazy we have these phrases we need to remove from our language. I do believe it's absolutely about where we focus our attention.
So you're a smart business committed to innovation, to service and to modern marketing, and you're asking, what's next? Wondering how you can become even more innovative. My name is Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and this is the InnovaBuzz Podcast, where we share all kinds of tips, advice and interview guests on all things innovation and leadership in modern marketing. Hi innovators, it's great to be back. I hope you've had an awesome week so far. I'm really excited to have on the InnovaBuzz podcast as my guest today, Neen James, the author of Folding Time and Attention Pays. Now in 2017, she was named one of the top 30 leadership speakers by Global Guru because of her work with companies like Viacom, Comcast and Abbot Pharmaceuticals. Neen is full of energy, quick-witted, and shares some powerful strategies for paying attention to what matters so you can get more done and create change more easily. We talk about the attention pays framework for being productive, about being accountable for the things that you want to achieve and telling someone about them being a really powerful way to make sure you focus your attention, because interestingly, we don't mind letting ourselves down, but we don't want to let someone else down. And we talk about how technology is not the enemy of our attention. In fact, we are, because we choose to make technology more important than people. We are the ones who make the choices we make and take the actions we take. So we can choose to act differently. Without further ado then, let's fly into the hive and get the buzz from Neen James. Hi, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBuzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the InnovaBuzz podcast today from Doylestown in Pennsylvania in the USA, Neen James, who's a leadership and productivity expert. She's a coach, a mentor, a keynote speaker, and she's the author of 2 books called Attention Pays and Folding Time. Welcome to the podcast, Neen. It's a privilege to have you.
G'day. What a delight to get to serve your listeners today from the other side of the pond.
That's right, the other side of the pond. But as we discovered recently, we actually have lived in very close proximity at different times.
Very close indeed.
Yeah. So Ian Altman from Same Side Selling suggested we speak to you. So a big hello to Ian.
Oh, we love him. I was just on his Grow Your Revenue podcast recently again, and he is doing such cool things in the world. He's a great human.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. So I haven't heard that. It's not published yet, is it?
No, we literally just recorded it this week. So I imagine It'll probably hit early April.
All right. Good. I look forward to that one. So before we start talking about productivity and leadership, innovation and those sort of things, let's find out a bit more about you as a person. So obviously you grew up in Australia. Did you envisage yourself doing what you're doing now and living in the US when you were young?
You know, as a teenager, I always used to watch those sitcoms, right? And we would get our sitcoms and our fashion and music from the US. And so I guess I was a little fascinated with it, but I don't think I'd thought about it as a business. But as I stepped out of my corporate role and I created my own business, I realized that the profession that I'd chosen, which was keynote speaking, is huge in the US. In Australia, it's a smaller market. And so I think I had aspirations one day to work in the US. I didn't realize that would involve myself and my honey totally relocating here, but I love it. But I have the privilege of coming back to Oz at least once or twice a year, so I still stay very connected that way. But I don't know if I kind of had that vision. I think it was maybe a dream, but it's an incredible reality now.
All right. And so you spent some time in the corporate world and then decided to head out on your own?
I did.
Yeah. So what's the mission of your business now? Why do you do what you do?
You know, I'm obsessed with getting the world to pay attention. Jürgen, I think that when we get people to pay attention, companies make more money. They have repeat clients. We have stronger relationships. We take care of the planet that we live on. And so this obsession has really driven my work. I believe that attention is the evolution of productivity. And I was always very focused on productivity. How do we get more done? How can we do things in a better way, a more creative way? And so many of your listeners understand this because they're all about innovation. But for me, what I realized is the true distinction was when we could get people to pay attention to who matters, what matters, and how we pay attention in the world. And that's what I'm really obsessed with.
Yeah, that's a great approach to it. I really like that because people in their striving to be more productive, I always hear this phrase, and I know you hate this one, I don't have enough time, but what they're saying is my attention is focused elsewhere.
Yeah,
I don't have the attention bandwidth right now to focus on this thing. And then it becomes a question of, well, what's most important?
Yeah, it's so true. And you know, when people say, I don't have time, it's such a lie because they do. You and I get the same amount of time. We get 1,440 minutes in a day. Time's going to happen whether we like it or not. Time is the great equalizer. Time is not prejudice. We can't manage time, but we can manage our attention. And you're 100% right. It's interesting to me too, Jürgen, when people say, oh, I'm just too busy. Well, what they're really saying is I'm too busy for you. And so we have these crazy words we use in our language. I don't have time, I'm too busy, or I need to kill time. Well, time never really did anything to you. So it's kind of crazy we have these phrases we need to remove from our language. I do believe it's absolutely about where we focus our attention.
Yeah, that's right. And time, I can't remember the book now. It's a while since I've read it, but it basically pointed out that time is actually just a construct that we've put together to understand life or understand how things move forward.
Absolutely. And when you think about that whole concept of time, we treat time very differently, right? And so it's amazing to me that if something's super important to us, or there's a person that's super important to us, they become our priority. It doesn't matter what time we have, right? If there is someone you deeply care about, or something you really care about, or a cause that's important to you, if you serve in your church, your temple, your community, we make the time for the things that are important to us.
That's right. Yeah, well, I had an experience yesterday. It wasn't quite as pleasant as others, but, my wife had a bit of a turn and ended up in hospital while everything else stopped and the world didn't end. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry that happened, but isn't it interesting that in that moment that your only decision is about taking care of that person who you care so deeply about? Everything else fades away, and we think our email's important. We think meetings are important. We think reading every trade journal is important. We think whether we're a corporate person or we have our own business as an entrepreneur, we place importance on all of these things, but it often comes back to the who is important to us as really one of our core decision-making abilities. It's a decision filtering system of who deserves your attention.
That's right. And you have a kind of a framework that splits it up into a who, what, and how, right? So
I do, yeah. The attention pays framework, when we researched this book, what we realized through all of the interviews we did and the research we did, that really we pay attention in three ways. Jürgen, we pay attention personally, and that's really about being thoughtful and who deserves your attention. We pay attention professionally, which is really about being productive. And that's what you pay attention to. And then thirdly, it's about globally being responsible. And that's about how we pay attention in the world. Now, global to some of your listeners might be their community. Global might be the planet. Global, when I think about things like the Great Barrier Reef, I snorkeled that reef 25 years ago. And it was this amazing, vibrant, beautiful, incredible treasure in Australia. And then recently I was there last year and it broke my heart to see how different the reef is. I was snorkeling on the exact same spot, and it was incredible at how it has changed over the 25 years. So, I think our attention is so much more than just the person who's in front of us. It's really what we want to focus on and how we're showing up in the world.
Yeah. And of course, you raise a really good point there in terms of paying attention to external environment and leaving a footprint on the planet, which is something that perhaps in terms of productivity, governments could learn from.
Right? And I feel so privileged having grown up as an Aussie. And, I think as Australians, we are very environmentally aware. We take care of our planet. We do, I grew up that way, and so coming from such a small town, my grandfather had a dairy farm. Like, it's interesting having that wonderful upbringing and then being part of, a different part of the world where I remember when I first moved to the US about, they paying for recycling. I was like, well, doesn't everyone recycle? And they're like, no, you have to pay extra for those recycling bins to be picked up. I was like, okay, I'm happy to do that. But that was just interesting, some of the cultural differences that I've been exposed to.
All right. Now, of course, with today's technology and so on, it's attention is often split between gadgets and people. So what's your advice on that? I mean, I was away for the weekend with my daughter and we were cycling, and every time we got into a little cafe or something, the people are sitting at a table, they're all getting together for a lunch or a dinner, but they're all on their phones. They're all sitting at the same table on their phones.
Right? Oh, it's crazy. But Jürgen, technology is not the enemy of our attention. We are. Yeah. Because we're choosing to make technology more important than people. We're grabbing for our devices in those moments where we used to talk to people. And I think what's interesting to observe, like you did when you were with your daughter, that sometimes people grab for their, device, their cell, their laptop, their iPad, whatever it is, almost as a default now. So if the person's not keeping our attention, or we're not interested in the movie, or the person isn't talking directly to us, by default we grab for our device, and it's a habit that we've created. And unfortunately, what I find is it's contributing to what I call the over trilogy. And the over trilogy is people are feeling very overwhelmed, they're overstressed, and they're overtired. And I think it's because of the choices we're making in this attention deficit society. And I'm not talking about ADD. I think ADD is very different, and that's medically diagnosed. I'm talking about the fact we've created this attention deficit society. And what we need to do is understand technology is not the enemy. It's not the enemy of our attention. We are. The choices we're making every day as leaders, whether we are a leader of one, if you own your own business, whether you are a leader of people in a corporate environment, we are the people who have to make the choices around the choices we make and the actions we take, especially with our attention.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think back to, before everybody had mobile phones, and you would find people sitting in cafes reading the newspaper or reading a book, but that depended on whether they had access to it at the time, whereas today everybody's got the mobile phone in their pocket.
Yeah, we carry these supercomputers in our hand, and think about how it's even changed our conversations, Jürgen, because when you think about it, if you used to ask someone about the weather and you'd say, well, what's the weather going to be like tomorrow? And they'd be like, oh, I don't know, I haven't seen the news, or I haven't looked up yet. But now, if you say to someone, I wonder what the weather's going to be tomorrow, they instantly pull out their cell phone, pull up the weather app, and then, but what they want to do is they want to help you, like they think they're helping you. And it's interesting to me that we've gone to this supercomputer and we constantly are looking for answers, and we're doing it trying to be of service to the other person, when maybe all they want to do is just have a conversation with us. So being able to set some parameters around device-free conversations with friends or family, that can be really powerful, like you and your daughter, especially if you're out cycling. You want to enjoy the beautiful scenery so you can stop and take those amazing photos that you take. That's the kind of thing that you want to be able to do, as opposed to, I think what happens is people just stop and take a photo, but they don't actually stop to enjoy it.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, well, I did use the phone I used the phone for taking photos on the bike, but I also referred to the phone occasionally. But it was in part of the conversation, because what you said earlier, how conversations changed. One of the examples is, I wonder, what's one that came up? It was, I wonder what they used to do with this building way back. And I said, well, we don't need to wonder, we can look it up. And so we got the information, but then, that prompted a different conversation as opposed to just speculating and not knowing.
It's so crazy. I used to live in Milson's Point in Sydney, so we had an apartment on the harbour, and we looked out at the harbour bridge, and every year we hosted the New Year's Eve party, because as you know, in Australia it is the coolest night. In Sydney, New Year's Eve, when they let fireworks off the bridge, and people would wait in the park underneath there for hours on end to get the perfect view of the fireworks. So the one night that I get homesick every year, because I live in the US now, is always New Year's Eve. And my poor husband, I think he was so tired of me always complaining on New Year's Eve that I was homesick, because it's cold here and nobody has a party and there's no fireworks. And so one year we decided to go back. So recently we came back for New Year's Eve, and I was beyond excited about this. And we stayed there at Milson's Point in our old stomping ground. What was insane to me was, I'm only little, so I'm 4'10 and a half. But what happened was, as the fireworks started, everyone raised their cell phones to take photos and video of it that I couldn't see. And that was amazing to me, of how different it was, just how people, and I wonder if they're even going to watch that video, right? It's so crazy. So I think what we need to do is we need to get smarter about our device management.
So in terms of the framework about attention pays, so talk us through the idea of how you then focus on the things that are important and become more productive.
Well, let's take professional attention. I think what's happening is, for so many of us, we have these constant to-do lists in our head. And there's always things, and you know this from your corporate days, and you know it now with what the businesses you're running, and even with the podcast, right? There's thousands of things you have to do in order for this to be a success and for you to get it out into the hands of your listeners. And I think what happens is, there's so many things that are vying for our attention. We have to stop and do what I've called prioritize your priorities, which means an easy, simple technique that everyone listening to this could try is just stop and create a 15-minute appointment with yourself. And in that 15 minutes, I'd love you to identify your top 3 not negotiable activities. So before your head hits the pillow tonight, what are 3 things you must do? And we need to start stopping and looking at time differently. We need to think about, what are the most important things I need to achieve today to bring my business forward, to move my goals forward, to bring my health forward, whatever is important to you as an entrepreneur or a corporate person. And so one of the easiest strategies in the book, I think, but one that takes real focus and discipline, is create a 15-minute appointment with yourself every day. One strategic appointment at the beginning of the day to identify what's your top 3 not negotiable activities you must achieve today. And when people start getting into the habit of that, Ian Altman that you referenced earlier, Ian started doing this, and he said to me recently when we were talking about this strategy, he said he was amazed at how much more he got done by honoring those 3 things he had identified, because it's almost like a game you can play, Jürgen, with yourself, where you can say, I have to get these done before I waste my time on anything else. So those 3 things also become a decision filtering system for how you want to spend your day.
Yeah, the power of focus is quite amazing. And I do a variant of that. I have, time, I usually spend the early part of Monday planning out the whole week along those lines and actually assigning 3 to 4 or sometimes I do 5 activities for each day. And since I've been doing that and since I really focus on those things, often I'll get those things done and it'll be mid-afternoon and I'll feel as though, I've all of a sudden got a lot of time on my hands. So you do think about time differently, whereas other days things don't go quite to plan and I might be there after dinner still finishing off those tasks that I do. I do say, okay, they're the things that need to happen today, and it makes a huge difference.
It's so clever. I'm a huge believer in accountability. I believe that public accountability drives private accountability. And one of the things, I have an accountability partner in my life, and every Friday we send emails to each other of the things we've achieved in our business that week. And so we were writing these great reports to each other, feeling like we were making some progress. And then we decided to switch it up a little bit. And we decided that on the Monday, we would send our goals of what we wanted to achieve to the other person for the week. And then on the Friday, we would report back on the achievement of those goals. And it was fascinating, Jürgen, how much it changed our behavior and activity, because I never want to report back to her that I didn't do everything I said I would do, right? And so when you think about attention, an accountability strategy, whether it's an accountability partner, maybe it's a business partner, a colleague, your partner you share your life with, but being accountable for the things you want to achieve and telling someone about them, that's a really powerful way to make sure you focus your attention, because interestingly, we don't mind letting ourselves down, but we don't want to let someone else down, right? And so when you think about, like, if you have a workout partner and you say, let's go to a 6 o'clock class, and we're going, yes, let's go to a 6 a.m. class. The two of us are going to get up in winter and we're going to go to this class. And then if you don't want to get to that class at 6 a.m. because you're cold and it's cozy in bed, the fact that you know you're going to meet someone at the gym at 6 o'clock, you're like, oh, I can't let them down. I don't want to cancel. So you get up and you get to the gym, and then you probably feel better once you've got there. But this public accountability drives private accountability. And I believe that that's a real strategy when it comes to focusing our attention.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison, because I get up at 6 o'clock most mornings and go out for a bike ride. And as you say, some days when it gets cold and wet and wintry, you feel as though bed is a much better option. But if you've told, if you know that the other riders are expecting you, you kind of get up and I've got to be there.
It's so true. When I was training for my first marathon, I had hired a running coach to teach me how to run properly, because I'd never run before in my life. And for some unknown reason to myself, I decided to run a marathon. But what was interesting was, because the weather here where I live, I wasn't training in the most ideal weather in order to run the marathon. And I knew my coach would be waiting for me, so I couldn't bail. And I knew I had to get certain mileage in every week in order for me to make the marathon goals. It would have been really easy to bail because the weather wasn't fabulous and it was cold. But the fact that I knew that he would be there waiting for me and it was pitch black, it didn't matter. And I think there is something about holding ourselves to a standard and allowing others to help us achieve those goals by declaring to them, what do we really want to achieve? If you know your riders are there waiting for you, you don't want to let them down. And therefore, you have a more enjoyable experience too. And so I think there's something about shared goals and sharing our attention.
That's great advice. We do a meeting in the business at the beginning of the week. So these are the things we're going to focus on, but we don't actually say, okay, here's what we want to achieve. So we might adapt that, and then we do a review on the Friday. But it does have
just like tweak, right?
Yeah, that's right. And it does have a big impact. It really keeps everybody focused. And then if somebody asks a question around something that doesn't appear to be related on that, you'll often get the response, well, why are you doing that?
Right, right. And I think that also allows us, when we make a declaration in a team meeting like that and say, hey, here's what I want to focus on, other people then have an awareness of your goals and can sometimes do things to help you even get closer to those goals if they know what you're working on, and resources they can provide, recommendations like Ian recommended you and I connect, right? When we know what people are working on, it makes it so much easier for us to support them as well.
That's right. That's a really good point. Okay, so what are some of the, because the other thing I'm really interested in is team performance and employee performance in remote teams a lot, because our structure is we've got a lot of people that work remotely, and a lot of the businesses that we work with have remote teams. So what are your recommendations around productivity in that scenario?
I think with remote teams, we have to allow them to feel as connected to someone who might be in the same building as us. And there are different ways to do that. Definitely leveraging technology. This is where technology is really your friend. And that is things like using FaceTime, using Zoom, using video for meetings, so they feel like they're part of everything. I love when teams get to see each other face to face. It's such a luxury when we get to be with someone if they're remote. So also wondering whether you can budget to get your team together so they can have that real face to face conversation. But if you can't do that, I think video is the next best thing. So I encourage the teams that I work with in the US, especially those who are spread out, and some of my clients are obviously international, is where they can leverage video. And so you could just convert a couple of meetings, even some one-on-ones, to videos, so you can look someone in the eye. There's something really powerful about that. I also think it avoids the 15 emails that go backwards and forwards all the time if we can just have a conversation. So if you can't do video, sometimes just the simplicity of picking up the phone. It's hilarious to me that we carry these cell phones in our pockets, and yet we just don't use them to make calls. It's crazy, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's crazy. And, phone calls are now considered a personal touch. Isn't that interesting? Like, they're considered like a personal touch. And because we've become so digital with our text messaging, social media, and email. So I would encourage people that have remote teams to look for opportunities to leverage video, to leverage phone calls. But I would also consider that when you have remote teams is over-communicate. So one of the things that virtual teams often feel that they're on the outside. And so over-communicate and share some of those details that we might share in a coffee break room or over a break, or good news. Create forums and opportunities for people to still feel connected so that they don't feel like they are on the outside of everything. Also think about how you can encourage the team to be involved and support each other. So pair up remote team members with people who are in the building. So always make sure that they're even having a buddy system or some sort of mate that can say, hey, here's what happened this week, or one of the things that we thought was really funny was this. Bring people into the conversation so they don't feel like they're as remote. And then leverage technology with systems. Some companies use Basecamp. We use Slack in my office. So my team is also remote, but we use Slack, and it's just like an ongoing conversation through the day. And there are so many, there's Glip, there's all kinds of different instant messaging type services. But what we find is it helps us strengthen the relationships. If someone has a brilliant idea, then they start a new conversation, and then it doesn't allow our inboxes to get clogged up with emails unnecessarily. So think about the technology and leverage the technology is what I would say for remote teams.
Yeah, lots of great advice there. I with our own team, I avoid email at all costs. So we're using River, which is an alternative to Slack. We get on every morning and have a kind of a coffee room chat, if you like, and that's part of the culture. Good morning, how are you, what happened yesterday? So I'm sure they'll ask me about my wife and how she's doing this morning. So you have those conversations as if you're walking into the office and physically in the same place. But
I love it.
Yeah, avoiding the email and using phone and video when we get together. So so there's lots of great advice there. I had Fiona Kerr on the podcast a little while ago, and she's a neuroscientist, and she was talking about the impact of eye contact and people looking one another in the eye, the impact of that on how the brain responds, and how you actually much quicker can build a relationship with eye contact than if you're just talking to somebody.
It's so true. The best lesson I ever got on paying attention, Jürgen, was from my 5-year-old friend. And I remember he and I were debating, who was cooler? Was it Batman or Superman? And we're in this really hot debate, and he's 5, so you know what that's like.
Yeah.
And then he got so frustrated with me because I was also talking to his mom at the same time as talking to him. And then he grabbed my little face, he turned it towards him and he said, Neen, listen with your eyes.
I love it. I love it.
It was so powerful and I'll never forget it. And I think he, at 5, totally schooled me in attention.
Yeah, the wisdom of children, hey?
Yes, right?
All right. Well, this has been really great. I could go on for ages, but I want to respect your time, right? What I'd like to do is move on to the Buzz, which is our innovation round, and it's designed to help our audience, who are primarily innovators and leaders in their field, with some tips from your experience. So some additional tips, but answering targeted questions. So I've got 5 questions, and we're looking forward to some really insightful answers that will inspire people to help them do something awesome.
Cool. I'm ready.
All right. So what's the number one thing you think anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
I think we have to look at what's common and see how we can change it. There are so many things that we take for granted, so many assumptions we make. And I think true people who are very innovative look at the world very differently. So think of a better, easier way, a cheaper, faster, more elegant way to do something. Because sometimes that innovation comes by doing something no one else had ever thought about.
Great advice. Yeah. So, and focusing on doing it for the sake of being better, cheaper or faster. Yeah. How could you reinvent it
if I call it, I love zero-based thinking. I love to just start with like a blank sheet of paper, literally a blank sheet of paper. And that's what I encourage some of my clients to do as well. If you want to innovate something and you could redesign it, if you could design it from scratch, if you could start again, what would it look like?
Yeah, great advice. That's a great way to approach it. What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
For me, the best investment I think I've ever made in my business and in myself is hiring expertise. So for me, it's having coaches who can teach me and accelerate it for me. So I work with performance coaches for my keynote speaking. I work with business coaches. I work with financial coaches. And so for me, what I do is wherever I can, I look to those who have mastered something to accelerate my learning in it. And so rather than me trying to work out a better way to do it, I go to the best. And that's what I'd encourage your listeners to think about too, is can someone accelerate it for you? Because that's innovative if you're taking on board what they're suggesting and then you're putting your spin, your tweak, your distinction around it.
Yeah, I love that advice. Model or master this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So what's your favorite tool or system for improving productivity?
Oh gosh, it was hard to think of like one, and this probably sounds crazy, but my most favorite tool, the most used tool in my life is Evernote, because Evernote is a capturing system, it's a sorting system, it's my database of ideas. I capture photos and ideas and thoughts and all kinds of things, and I keep going back to it so many times in a day. So it's become a really great central place that coordinates across all my devices. So in its simplest form, Jürgen, it would have to be Evernote.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear you say that. I mean, I'm an Evernote user, but I haven't really become friends with it. I mean, I've got so much information in there, and I kind of park things to read in there, and I park some notes in there, but I just haven't become friends with it. Don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it.
I just use it for everything. I think it's my go-to place. If I'm going to take notes now, if I need to save something, if I'm trying to find something, even if it's just a thought I have, I know that I can't lose it if I put it in Evernote.
Yeah, it's certainly a great journaling tool and great technology, because if you go on the pro version, you can have it on all of your devices. So if you've got your phone in your pocket, you've got your notebook with you.
So true.
All right. What's the best way to keep a project or a client on track?
Accountability.
Yeah.
And written accountability. So an actual accountability plan that spans the life of the project with regular check-ins. And the check-ins might be by phone, by video, by email. But I think accountability is the absolute key. It goes back to what we said before, right? Public accountability drives private accountability.
Yeah, that's great advice, and certainly, fits in with your whole philosophy of prioritizing your priorities as well, having those milestones in place.
Right.
All right, and what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
It sounds a little cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think it's about being the best version of yourself. People say be you all the time, and some people you're like, oh, I don't know if I want them to be themselves. But when you think about the fact that you are the only person on this planet who has the experiences, understanding, knowledge, vision that you have, I think what it's about amplifying the best of you. So distinction comes because you see the world through a very unique lens. And you know this as a photographer. And so it's understanding that your lens, what you can do for people, the way you see the world, share the way you think. People want to know how you think because that can be very inspiring to others.
That's great advice. And I like the analogy to the photography because often I take a photo and I'll like it and I'll share it, but I don't necessarily consider it something really special or unique, and yet the feedback I get is, wow, that's awesome, and people get really excited over that photo. And I think it's what you say, it's because there's something that's totally unique about that because it's your view of it, it's your interpretation and so on.
You and I could take the same photo of the great apostles, but because of your knowledge of placement and light and movement, you would take such a beautiful photo that probably would really speak to someone, and mine would be just like a photo of a rock, right? So I think it is so much about the experience we bring, and I think for distinction to occur, you want to really appreciate the lens you see the world through so that you can be the best version of yourself and share that with people. Don't hide it, share it with them.
Great advice. So what's the future for you then, and is there another book in the works?
Well, the Attention Pays book is going to be, I think, a body of work that's going to serve me for quite a while, I hope, and I'm very excited about it. Seth Godin even endorsed the work. He loved it. So that was pretty exciting for me.
Yeah, that's special.
Yeah, it really was. But I think for me, the other thing that we have done is we've hired a research firm to really look at whether we all have different attention styles. So one of the things I'm very excited about is as this research unfolds is really discovering, not just how we pay attention in the world and who we pay attention to in the world, but how are we doing that based on our experiences, our generation, our backgrounds, our culture. And that's what I'm loving about this research. So for me, the Attention Pays work is going to be complemented by this research study that we're doing.
That's fascinating. Might have to chat to you about that offline.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. It's like a whole new world for me.
Yeah. All right. What's the number one piece of advice then you'd give to any business owner that wants to be a leader in innovation and in their field?
I'd say do it overwhelmed. I think what happens is as leaders, whether you're an entrepreneur or a corporate leader, you are constantly in a state where there is always more to do, there's more to learn, there's more to try, there's more to change. And so one of my mantras has been do it overwhelmed. Even if I'm overwhelmed, it still needs to get done. Even if I'm overwhelmed, I need to find a more interesting way to do it, a different way to look at it. So for those people who, especially if you're running your own business, you constantly feel like you're overwhelmed, right? And there's always things to do. I would say to you, do it overwhelmed.
That's fascinating. I was just thinking there because my mantra, if I feel overwhelmed, I actually turn it around and I say, I'm doing that. It's not, somebody's not doing it to me, it's me doing it. And I figure out, well, what can I do to remove that? And some of it is, okay, what's the next thing I need to focus on now to get one of my three things done? And maybe break that down into a smaller chunk. Because I remember one thing our piano teacher said to our kids when they were learning piano. So they were really into music in a big way, and they were doing these big concertos, 20-minute, half-hour piano concertos that they'd learn. And I was always amazed, and I'd ask, how the hell can kids of 8 and 10 remember those things. And she said, well, it's just like eating pizza. It's one piece at a time. And I remember that all the time. Anytime I'm overwhelmed or something, I said, what's the next bit of pizza?
That is so cool. That is so incredibly cool. And I think what we have to think about, you made a really great point there, Jürgen, it's about the language that we use, right? So I choose my lifestyle. It's not a lifestyle that I have to do. It's something that I choose to do. And I think the simplicity sometimes of replacing the word I have to do this with I choose to do this, right? I don't have time. I say I choose not to spend time on that. And so I think we have to think of the words we use because they have a massive impact on our focus and our productivity.
Yeah, that's right. And I like the idea of spending time, as I was thinking earlier in the interview when we were talking about everybody having the same amount of time, that, having it as a finite resource that you spend, like money. If you open up your wallet and say, well, I've got $100 there and I want all these different things, but I've only got $100, so I can't have them all. So what am I going to spend that $100 on?
Right.
Yeah.
It makes it so much more precious and you're more conscious about the spend bit. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Neen. This has been really great. Where can people reach out to you and say thanks for listening?
There is only one Neen James online. So it's just NEENJAMES.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Neen James. You can find me at NeenJames.com. But if you Google Neen James, you will find but one.
Yeah. Okay. And we'll have links to those on the show notes. And you've got quite a lot of videos on your YouTube channel. We'll link to that as well. And also to the books.
Thank you.
So finally then, who would you like me to interview on a future InnovaBuzz podcast and why?
Who would I like you to interview? I would love you to interview, there's an incredible talent, if you haven't already had her on the show, by the name of Tamsin Webster. And she has one of the coolest processes I've ever seen about taking your ideas and sharing them with the world. She calls it the red thread. And I love what she's doing in the world. It's just a very different way to look at ideas, and whether you're doing a pitch or a speech or you're trying to create marketing materials, I love her process. I hired her, over a year ago now, and it totally changed the way that I developed some of my speeches. So I would encourage you to check out Tamsin Webster and the red thread process.
Okay, well, we'll do that. Tamsin, look out for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Neen James.
I better warn her.
yeah, maybe you could introduce us.
I would be delighted to do that. It's been such a privilege to serve your listeners today. I loved hearing the Aussie accent as well. Desperately.
Yeah, hopefully it's not too confusing for people when I said at the beginning from Doylestown in the USA, and then all of a sudden they hear an Australian accent.
Yeah, it doesn't sound American. I hope I don't sound like that.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your time with us today, Neen. I've really enjoyed this and got a lot of insights out of it, and I think our listeners will enjoy that as well. So, so let's keep in touch.
Sounds like a plan. It's been my privilege. Thank you again for everything you do in the world. I love this.
Thanks. Well, wasn't that a heap of fun and highly educational? I hope you enjoyed hearing from Neen as much as I enjoyed speaking with her. All the ideas and tips that Neen shared with us can be found at InnovaBizz.co/Neen James. That is NEENJAMES, all lowercase, all one word, InnovaBizz.co/Neen James. You'll also find contact information for getting in touch with Neen, as well as links to her website there. Neen has also kindly shared with us an electronic copy of her book, Folding Time. So make sure you go to the end of the blog post where you can download a copy of the book, Folding Time, in PDF format. Neen suggested I interview Tamsin Webster, keynote message speaker, a message strategist, and the creator of the Red Thread process, on a future podcast. So Tamsin, keep an eye on your inbox for an invitation from us to the InnovaBuzz podcast, courtesy of Neen James. Stay connected. Head on over to iTunes or Stitcher or Pocket Casts and subscribe to the InnovaBuzz podcast so you make sure you'll never miss another episode. We'd also love you to leave us a review because what you think matters. Take some of the ideas you've heard today and apply them in your business. Any thoughts, ideas, suggestions or questions, share them in the comments below the blog post. And remember, if you want to get better marketing results than you ever have, join our fantastic LinkedIn community at the Transformational Marketing Academy. All you have to do is go to InnovaBiz.co/TMAC. It's free to join. Hope to see you there soon. Until next time, I'm Jürgen Strauss from InnovaBiz. Remember to be awesome and keep innovating.